Did you know Reed College is one of Southeast Portland's largest employers? Reed has opportunities in a wide range of career fields from entry-level to senior management in occupations such as community safety, IT, and public affairs. Reed offers exceptional benefits in a working environment that combines Portland's natural beauty with an inclusive, progressive campus. Whether you're just starting out or looking for the next chapter in your career, start your search at jobs.reed.edu. Come work with Reed's friendly and accomplished staff at one of the nation's top colleges.
This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forstag, Becky Thomas, and Jessica Black from the Mac's List team. This week, our topic is how to talk about a career break when you're returning to work. You've taken a career break, perhaps to raise children, care for a parent, or go on a sabbatical. You're feeling rested, relaxed, and ready to get back to work. Many people struggle, however, with explaining taking time out from a career. Our guest expert this week is Carol Fishman Cohen. She's the founder and CEO of iRelaunch. She says with preparation and the right messages, you can make a great case for yourself. We talk later in the show. Many people volunteer during a career break. This lets you do work that makes a difference, and it can help you grow your network and improve your skills. Ben has found a website with the best international volunteer gigs. He tells us more in a moment. What's the best time of year to look for a job? That's our question of the week. It comes from listener Wendy Lynn of Talent, Oregon. Becky shares her advice shortly. First, as always, let's check in with the Mac's List team. Now, our topic this week is how to talk about a career break when you're going back to work. How have you all done this yourselves or seen others do it successfully? Ben, you want to jump in first?
Sure. So I'm, I guess, a little bit too young in my career to have had too many breaks in it. I think the thing I would share was when my first son was born, it was really important for me to spend more time at home, and I was in a place that didn't have a formal paternity leave program. And so when I approached my boss about, I'd like to work from home for a couple days a week for the next couple months to support my wife, the key for me in that request was like spelling it out very clearly how this is going to work. I will be online from this time to this time. You can always call me on my phone. I'll be responsible for doing X, Y, and Z, so that it wasn't up to my manager to figure out how to make it work. I basically told them this is how it could work. All I need you to do is say yes.
So you were stopping work for a time period, but you were being clear about you were going to be available, or you were working remotely from home?
Well, I was taking a little bit of time off, but then it was about where I was going to make that transition. So I'm going to work at home for a couple days a week, and here's what it will look like, and then I'll come back to the office full time at this point.
Okay, yeah. Becky, what are your thoughts?
I've never taken sort of a thoughtful, planned break from work, so I don't have a whole lot of, experience with it, but I have seen others do it successfully, and I think one of the keys is to, when you're coming back from a longer break or time off from work, is to really sort of add that story of what you were doing during the break to sort of the entire sort of narrative about who you are as a professional and how the break ties into that. So if you took a break from work to care for your children, using the skills that you used during that break and how, you're a responsible person, you're caring, you're supporting your family, all those things, tie back into your professional sort of the list of great things about you as a professional as well.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say is similar to that of I've always used, if I've had sort of pockets of time in between official work roles, I've always used my volunteer time, what I've done in as a volunteer to supplement that. And I've always put it, not always, but certain volunteer roles I put on directly into my work experience portion, or I call it professional experience, on my resume, so that I can kind of what you were saying, using that narrative and be able to address it head on and just say, here's what I was doing in between. I took this, I maybe quit this job or had a contract job that ended, and I didn't, I was doing these other things in between when I looked for another job. Yeah. Or, especially when you're talking to, interviewing with someone to end that sort of break between paid work, it's really good to have something else, whether it's caring for family or volunteer experience or whatever it may be that you've done to sort of, here's my skills, here's where I haven't just been sitting on the couch doing nothing.
Well, and I mean, sometimes people do though. Like,
that could be a sabbatical. You could have a sabbatical.
Those of us who know Jessica Black know that she's not going to sit around on the couch.
Not Jessica, but other people.
Yeah, no time for that. I think you can just you can have a sabbatical and take actual time, but say, I took this intentional break
be
off.
Clear about it.
Yeah, I think that's great too.
And not be apologetic and be like,
right.
oh yeah, I was just really lazy or in a bad time in my life. Like, don't go into that. Just be positive about it.
I always wanted to go to Paris
or I hated my last job. I was so burnt out, blah, blah, blah. Like, don't
always
go into
focus
that
on the
stuff.
positive.
I would actually say, that I always wanted to go to Paris thing would probably be okay though, wouldn't it? Like if you said this is a dream for me and it's something I worked hard for, and
it shows you're goal oriented. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a gap year, but just not right after college.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you need to say a little more than that, though. You need, I think employers are going to want to make sure that you had something you want to accomplish during that time in Paris or Thailand or maybe South Dakota, wherever you decided you wanted to go.
Tie it back to the skills.
Yeah, what did you get out of that experience? What did you learn? And how might it apply to the job?
Yeah.
I followed your lead on this, Jessica. Like when I've been, I haven't taken a formal career break, but I have been unemployed 3 times, and 2 of them were lengthy periods. And I too sought out volunteer experience that was professionally related, and I used those experiences to fill those gaps in my resume.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I know today with Carol, we're going to talk about people who have taken long-term breaks, particularly to your point, Becky, about raising families and caring for family members. And she's going to have some, I know, great suggestions about how to have this conversation when you're out there looking for work.
I think that's really good and really important because a lot of people don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, first, though, let's turn to you, Ben, because you're out there every week exploring the internet, looking for websites, books, tools that our listeners can use in a job search or a career. So what have you found for us this week?
So this week I want to talk about a resource that I think would help a lot of people I meet with. You and I and Becky and Jessica, we meet with job seekers all the time, and oftentimes they tell us things like, well, I'm looking for meaningful work, and that's understandable. And a lot of times people also say and I'm also looking to see the world. I've been stuck in this town since I was 20 or since I was born, and I want to see the world a little bit more and do something. And I think for a lot of folks, what that means at the end of the day is a really good opportunity for them would be international something, volunteer work, anything like that. So the resource I want to share this week is the 2017 Best Volunteer Abroad Programs, Organizations, and Projects. And this is from a website called volunteerforever.com. So, volunteering abroad isn't just for church youth groups and just out of college Peace Corps cadets. There's a lot of opportunities there for older people, particularly people who have professional skills. So you can use the education and training experience you have right now to help people where such skills are much less common. So the thing I liked about this is that it's not just going abroad and teaching English, although there's a lot of opportunities for teaching English abroad if you want to do that. But it's how you can use the skill set you have now somewhere else in the world. And we always emphasize this. If you're going to volunteer as part of a job search strategy, you want to volunteer in your field or doing something where you kind of exercise your existing skills. And so this website has a list of resources where you can do that. The site has a list of different organizations that organize international volunteer trips, along with some very specific projects these organizations work on. And again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the projects focus on teaching English, also a lot of things on healthcare and education. But there are a lot of other cool projects out there, including things like manatee rescue, or temple restoration, or maintaining the Inca Trail, or training elephants. Those are some of the more exotic ones, but I think just about any skill set you have, you could probably find some international volunteer opportunity out there. And so if that's something that you're looking to do, to take some time off of formal work, get some work-relevant experience and see a different part of the world, this would be a good website for you. Again, it's called the 2017 Best Volunteer Abroad Programs, Organizations and Projects, and we'll have the full URL in the show notes.
Great. And then, Ben, do the length of these volunteer gigs vary? I know sometimes when people go overseas to teach English, they'll do it for a year, but are these assignments that can last months or even a few weeks?
Yeah, I think it's as short as 2 or 3 weeks, and then all the way up to, I think, multiple years. I didn't dig deep into some of the visa requirements, which is what you get into when you start talking about year-long volunteer opportunities. That's always something you got to keep in mind. But I think there's a lot of flexibility here about how much time you want to contribute to the cause.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ben. And if you have a suggestion for Ben, please write him. We'd love to share your idea on the show. Ben's address is ben@maxlist.org. Now, it's time to hear from you, our listeners, and Becky is here to answer one of your questions. So, Becky, what's in the mail bag this week?
This week's question comes from Wendy Lynn of Talent, Oregon. She asks, I'm wondering to what extent job openings are seasonal. Are there better or worse times to look for a job? So this is a good question, Wendy. I think that in general, it depends on the industry that you're looking to work in. So a lot of sort of retail and services industry type work can be seasonal. So retailers will hire around the holidays. Tax preparation is also another one I thought of. There's a lot of sort of like build up around tax prep and sort of accounting sort of stuff around the tax season in the spring. And also like, service industry work around seasonal activities like skiing, summer camps, that kind of thing. So those are definitely seasonal. But they're sort of, that industry is just like typically that's the way it works, busier seasons and things like that, and not always full time. So those are sort of some of the, big ones. But as far as like professional level stuff, there's, ebbs and flows in general. But typically things slow down around holidays, especially like the winter holidays around December or January. But pick up early in the calendar year, like January, February, after budgets are approved and, the company has budget to hire somebody new, they're going to start hiring for that earlier in the year. So that's sort of the general seasonal advice I would give. Do you guys have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the business cycle has a lot to do with it. And so you pointed out the big one, which is like people stop hiring at the beginning of December.
Yeah.
And frankly, a lot of people stop looking at the beginning of December because people's minds are elsewhere.
Sure.
And then they hire again in January. I think you see the same thing in late June because a lot of organizations have a July to June fiscal year. I know here at MaxList, like January is always a big month for us. July is often a very big month for us. And the slow months tend to be like September's.
Late
August.
Summer, August.
I'm already dating us. August, which is where we're at right now. And so it will be interesting to see what that looks like over here. But yeah, I think that's generally when organizations realize they have the budget or accept that they have the budget to bring in new people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you all are spot on here. I would say if there's a particular company or field that you're interested in working in, finding out, to your point, Becky, what the budget cycle is going to give you a sense of when you're most likely to see openings for hiring. Yeah. And something that's changed a lot in the age of Amazon and other online stores, you just don't see the demand in retail for holiday help that you might have 25 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, as far as like the number of openings.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Department stores and malls used to hire people between Thanksgiving and December. You could always count on that. And in those old days, even the post office would add lots and lots of people. So if you were looking to make some extra money in a part-time job, that was one way of doing it.
But that's kind of shifted to a different sector, because now I know like Amazon ramps up its hiring around the fulfillment centers.
Yep.
Yeah. The folks who are going out there and putting the stuff in the boxes and getting it mailed. And it may well be with all those boxes being shipped, USPS and UPS and FedEx all need more help too.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, thank you for the question. And if you've got a question for Becky, please send her an email. Her email address is becky@maxlist.org, and you can also call our listener line. That number is area code 716-JOB-TALK, or send us a tweet. Our Twitter handle is @MaxList, and there's an underscore between Max and List. If we use your question on the show, we'll send you a copy of Land Your Dream Job Anywhere, our new book, and we'll be dropping a copy to Wendy in the mail. And we'll also be back in a moment. And when we return, I'll talk with this week's guest, Carol Fishman Cohen, about how to talk about a career break when you're ready to return to work.
Reed College is one of Southeast Portland's largest employers. Reed offers competitive salaries and exceptional benefits on a campus that combines architectural and natural beauty with an inclusive, progressive work environment. If you're looking for jobs in Portland, consider joining Reed's friendly and accomplished staff, like Taylor Smith, Associate Director of Computer User Services.
I think the best part of working at Reed has to be the people. The size of Reed is much smaller than what I've worked at before, and I think that makes this such a great community. This is a really special place.
Like Alexander Charon, Assistant Director of Annual Fund.
It's great working with students. They think about really immense things, and they have you thinking about immense things. And that really is great, because in advertising, I didn't think about anything immensely except maybe, stress and stuff.
Whether you're just starting out or looking for the next chapter of your career, begin your search at jobs.reed.edu. That's jobs.reed.edu.
Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Carol Fishman Cohen. She's the CEO and founder of iRelaunch, a pioneering company in the career reentry space. She contributes regularly to the Harvard Business Review, and her TED Talk on relaunching has been viewed over 1.5 million times. Carol also hosts the 321 iRelaunch podcast, and she has a bachelor's degree from Pomona College and an MBA from Harvard Business School. She joins us today from Boston. Carol, thanks for being on the show.
Hi, Mac. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, Carol, as you know, our topic this week is how to return to work after a career break. Let's start by talking about who typically takes a career break, Carol, and why do they do that?
Well, probably the biggest subset of people who are on what we call voluntary career breaks are females who take career breaks for childcare reasons. But we have men who take career breaks for childcare reasons, and men and women who take career breaks for reasons that have nothing to do with childcare. It could be elder care or pursuing a personal interest or a personal health issue.
And when people are coming back to work, what are the top challenges you see people face after they've taken a break?
Well, probably the number one challenge is that people have to figure out exactly what they want to do. I know it sounds obvious, but we're talking typically about a multi-year career break here. It could be 1 to over 20 years, and the longer you're out, the more important this is. But you have to think about whether your interests and skills have changed or have not changed while you've been out of the workforce.
And today we're talking about how to talk about that break and what to say. But I just love the fact that you're making this point. You have to be clear about what you want to do next. Can you talk a little bit more about why that's important, Carol, and how it will help you reenter, just being clear about your goals?
Mm-hmm. Well, figuring out what you want to do drives every other part of your relaunch, as we call it. We call it relaunching, because you have to get clarity on exactly what you want to do in order to know what jobs you want to apply for, and in order to have the conversations with other people to articulate what you're interested in doing, so potentially they can be helpful to you. And that's one of the strategies, is that you want to get out of the house and start having these conversations. So the very first step is to get that clarity on exactly what you want to do. And then from there, everything else flows. Some of the other challenges that people have when they're first starting out have to do with building up their confidence again. I took a career break myself. I was out of the full-time workforce for 11 years and then returned to work in a financial analyst role after being home with my children. I felt very professionally disconnected when I was on my career break, and I really even stopped reading the newspaper on a regular basis. So I was feeling not only disconnected from my professional self, but I was also feeling like I had to get updated. I had to even just read the newspaper to know what was going on in the business world, to have conversations with people without talking about, some company that didn't exist anymore. So there are all sorts of pieces to that. And that, invigorating your networks, getting updated in your field, figuring out what you want to do. And all of those pieces help you build up your confidence over time.
And once those pieces are in place, or you're working on them and you're ready to go out and have conversations with people about that break and what you want to do next, what's your advice, Carol, about how to approach those talks? How do people begin?
Well, let's talk about first how people get connected. So we'll talk about actual language that you use in conversations in just a second. But I'm also thinking about, how do you even reconnect with people who you've been out of touch with, well, let's say, 5, 8, or 10 years. You might want to ask them to connect with you on LinkedIn. And of course, having clarity on about your career goals also drives setting up a LinkedIn profile, and that's a completely separate topic. But let's say you ask someone who you've been out of touch with for 10 years to connect with you on LinkedIn, and they accept. Then you can you have their contact information. You can email them and you can say, "Hi, Jim. It's great to be back in touch again. I've been on career break for the last 10 years, and I'm in information gathering mode." It's really important to establish right up front with people you've been out of touch with that you are not getting back in touch with them because you are looking for a job and you want them directly and immediately to help you find a job, but you want to communicate, "I'm in information gathering mode." And a great question to ask people at this stage is, who do you consider the best experts to be in our field? I'm spending a lot of time updating myself and being very strategic and thoughtful about exactly what I want to do, or exactly what part of the business I want to get back into. Which experts do you follow? What do you think are the best books that have been written lately? What websites are you on? And who's writing the best articles or blogs? Those are great questions to ask people you're getting back in touch with, without them feeling like, A, you're being opportunistic, and B, it's an easy response for them. It's something that they can be helpful right away with you, as opposed to, "Oh no, that person got in touch with me because now they want me to help them get a job." So I would say to take that baby step and reestablish relationships around questions that have to do with being in information gathering mode. But this other question that you're asking me in terms of how do I talk about my career break really comes up a little later in the process, when you're talking to people in your field, maybe at a professional event, or even in the interview, and someone gets really focused on the fact that you're just coming off of a 6-year career break. And they might even say, "Wow, I see there's like a 6-year career break or gap here on your resume. Tell me about that." And then that is your opportunity to acknowledge that you took the career break, not apologize for it, and then move on to why you're the best person for the role. So you might respond, "Yes, I took a career break to care for my children, and now I can't wait to get back to work. In fact, the reason I am so excited about this particular position at your company is because when I worked at Xerox, we faced very similar customer challenges. Let me tell you about one of them. So you're able to give that message. And the other message you can say is, I didn't apply for this job on a whim. I applied for this job after a lot of thinking about where my interests and skills were strongest and where I could add the most value. So that's why I was so attracted to this position. And then you can go on and, here's some experience I had at Xerox that was really relevant to the job responsibilities. So again, you want to acknowledge why you took the career break, you don't apologize, and then move on to why you're the best person for the role. The only other thing I'll say here is that this kind of response requires you to have in your back pocket an anecdote from each of your significant prior work and volunteer experiences. And you have to first identify what those are, think about the past, recreate the past. What were some of those great experiences? Document them, and then practice saying them out loud so you can bring them up during the course of the interview whenever they become relevant.
So there's so much good information in that answer that you just shared with us, Carol. And just to break it down, I love just talking about how do I talk about a career break. I love the fact that your advice not to apologize, communicate why you're excited, take advantage of the research that you recommended that people do earlier, so that the listener knows that you're not applying on a whim. This is something that you've given thought to, and it's a strategic choice. What kind of reaction do you see people get when those folks that you work with who follow this approach?
Well, we think that when you give this kind of reaction, you're kind of retraining the interviewer in a way to look differently at the relauncher population, to think more about, this is a person who is at a great stable life stage to come back to work, fewer maternity leaves or no maternity leaves, fewer spousal or job relocations. This is someone who's mature, who's educated, who has great work experience, who has energy and enthusiasm about returning to work precisely because they've been away from it for a while. And these answers give you a chance to display those qualities. And I especially think that energy and enthusiasm about returning to work precisely because you've been away from it for a while. I remember this vividly myself, that in year 9 of my 11-year career break, I was chomping at the bit to get back to work. I went back in 2001 before anyone was talking about this, and I had no idea how I was going to do it. But I remember feeling like it was my time, and I was really ready. So any part of the conversation that allows you to communicate that, I think really opens the eyes of the interviewers to realize, wow, this is a different kind of candidate than I'm used to speaking with, and there are some really great attributes of the demographic.
Now, how do many people who take a break to care for family or raise children, they remain involved in the community, often doing a lot of volunteer work. How do you recommend people talk about that volunteer experience when they're sitting down with a potential employer?
Well, first of all, let's talk about volunteer work on the resume or on your LinkedIn profile, because we think that substantive and relevant volunteer work belongs on the resume side by side with your paid work experience. So I know that LinkedIn, for example, has a section for volunteer experience. We would say use that section for maybe volunteer experience that was important to you, but maybe not directly relevant to your goals, your career goals. But in the main body of your LinkedIn profile or on your resume, you should be putting that volunteer work and describing it just like you would paid work. So that's number one. On the resume, you can actually create a section, instead of calling it work experience, just call it experience. And then you can list that volunteer work in addition to your paid work. And, quantify whenever possible, use action words. And we find that employers are quite interested in volunteer work to the extent that it is relevant to the job that you're applying for.
Those are great tips. And I see people take the same approach when they're between jobs and they need to explain what they've been doing between positions. Once you've done that work on your online profile and your resume, and you're having a conversation with a potential employer, what's the best approach to talking about that volunteer experience?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just remembered one more thing I want to say about volunteer work before I jump into the actual conversation with the interviewer, and that is that there are some specific resources that are global databases of volunteer opportunities. We call it strategic volunteering, taking on volunteer roles that are in line with your career goals. So if you want to manage a construction project, then take on a weekend build for Habitat for Humanity. We had a relauncher who was interested in returning to the field of architecture and volunteered in a summer program introducing high school students to architecture. We had a writer who became the volunteer editor and head writer for an online nonprofit newsletter on her career break. So, again, when you're talking about these experiences, you're going to talk about them just like they were paid. You say, well, for the last 6 months, I've been working really hard on this Habitat for Humanity build project, and we're working on in this particular area, and we. I don't know the details of construction management, but you would talk about it as if the same way you talk about a job. And it's for any of these examples that I just gave, you just want to be specific and talk about what your role was. And employers are going to completely see the relevance and the parallel between that work and the job that you're applying for. There are 3 great sources for strategic volunteering. One is idealist.org, and another one is volunteermatch.org. Both of those resources are global databases of volunteer opportunities, and they're really role-based. You can sort by location, and it'll give you all different roles that you can have in organizations. Then there's another one called catchafire.org, and that is project-based volunteer work, and many of those projects are remote. So I just wanted to mention those 3 resources as places to look for and find relevant volunteer opportunities.
Those are great tips. We'll be sure to include URLs for those sites in the show notes. And I also just want to give you a shout out for encouraging people to think about volunteer opportunities strategically. As you talk, Carol, I was reminded of the advice that college students often get about internships. Choose experiences that allow you to test whether you want to work in a field or that let you get credentials and experiences that will help you get a job if that's indeed the field you want to work in. And you're giving basically the same advice to mid-career or senior people who've been out of the workforce for a while but want to get back in and need to have the most up-to-date credentials and the authority and credibility that comes with it.
And I would also add, in the case of the relaunch or the mid-career professional, to look at certificate programs in almost the same way. The certificate programs, even though you have to pay to do those, very strong signaling to employers that you're serious about updating in a particular field. You can take certificate programs in fundraising or development or landscape design or running a political campaign. And they're great to put at the top of your resume, relevant coursework. It's something recent and relevant, and you're sending these signals to employers. I'm very serious about this. And the last piece I'll say about that is, especially when people are returning to a technical field, you might be required to, for example, get Lean or Six Sigma certification in manufacturing, if you're in manufacturing engineering or quality engineering, for example, in order to even qualify to apply for certain roles. So that's another piece, is to think about where some education might fit in to your preparation along with that volunteer work that you might be doing.
Well, speaking of qualifications, what advice do you give to people who are coming back to the workplace and are thinking about applying for positions for which they might be overqualified or might pay less than what they were earning in their last position?
All right, so a couple of comments about being overqualified. So some people feel that being called overqualified is a veiled form of ageism. So I would say, first of all, that the antidote to ageism is subject matter expertise. So if you're worried about being viewed as too old, then the most important thing that you can do is get really up to date in your field, and then go to professional events or meetups or other places where you're meeting other people in your field and get in conversations with them about the latest thinking in the field, the articles and the books and the speakers and the experts. Because if you're up to date on those and you can talk about that subject matter in an energetic and knowledgeable way, they're going to look at you more in terms of what you know versus how old you are. So I just want to establish that first. As far as overqualified is concerned, I just wrote a piece for Fairy Godboss, actually, called 5 Reasons Why People Take Lower Pay When They Return to Work. And one of the reasons is that sometimes people simply want a less stressful job. So they will go for a role that is actually junior to what they might have left before their career break. Then they have to convince the employer or the interviewer that they did this intentionally. So the language that we would recommend in a situation where someone might say, wow, you really seem overqualified for this position, you can then respond, I understand why you might think I'm overqualified for this position, but I intentionally applied for this role at this level because I want to provide excellent results to my employer, and I want to manage my life outside of work. And I thought long and hard about what level I should be at in order to achieve both of those goals, and this job was exactly at that level. Now, there are some employers or hiring managers who will reject that out of hand, but others will never have looked at it that way before. And we have had members of the iRelaunch community use that language verbatim as they've moved through stages of the interview process and have gotten hired. It's a matter of educating the interviewer and the employer and letting them look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, I like that explanation a lot. I think it's very persuasive. Well, Carol, this has been a terrific conversation. Now, let's talk about what's next for you.
Well, we always have a lot going on at iRelaunch. We're very excited about a new product that we just launched called Roadmap, and it's a multimedia 5-stage return to work product that you can access online, and it's self-paced, and it really takes you through all the different stages that you need to successfully relaunch your career. And it's the culmination of a lot of the thinking and writing and work that we have been doing with thousands of relaunchers over the last 10 years. So that's something we're really excited about. We're also about to run our 21st iRelaunch Return to Work Conference in New York at Columbia University this fall. We'll have 600 people there. We sell out every year. And we are running these conferences now a couple of times a year on the West Coast at Stanford and on the East Coast at Columbia. And it's a day of education about career reentry strategy and the opportunity to have substantive conversations with employers interested in hiring people who are returning from career break.
Well, we'll be sure to include links to both that new product and your conference in our show notes. And I know people can find you and learn more about your company by visiting www.irelaunch.com. And you also host, as I mentioned at the start of the interview, a podcast, 321 iRelaunch, which is available on iTunes. Well, Carol, thanks for being on the show this week.
Thanks for having me, Mac. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Take care. We're back in the Max List studio. Now, what are your thoughts about my conversation with Carol? Who would like to go first? Ben, are you going to jump in?
I'll jump in.
You're leaning into the microphone.
I think one of the big takeaways here is the importance of kind of controlling the narrative around the time you've taken off, so that the employer is not kind of guessing and creating their own story in their head about why you were gone and why you're coming back. And so her point about, controlling the narrative all the way up to like telling someone like, I'm in information gathering mode right now. I'm not looking for a job.
I liked that part a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like telling people exactly where you're at and exactly what you're looking for, because it really makes you look like you're in control of your own situation. And it's not, you're being forced back to work because you need money or because some other reason. Like you're the agent in all of this.
And want to be really intentional and thoughtful about it. Yeah.
Yeah. You have a plan. There's a process that you're following. You're not just looking for a job. You've mapped out some steps.
Right.
I really also liked that she sort of underlined the situation of people who are coming back to work, the fact that they're stable and excited about work more than people who might have been working continuously for 20 years who are just like tired and
that's a good point. Yeah.
I think that was really, I think there's a lot of people who are in the situation that she was explaining for herself that, I hadn't been working for however many years and I was just chomping at the bit and so excited and had so much energy to put into that. So I think like the point she made about retraining employers and interviewers to think about that.
Yeah.
For people who are coming back to work is really important and powerful.
That's really important. Yeah. I also really liked her note about thinking about certificates or additional training to be able to not only build your skills and refresh all of your knowledge in that industry, but also demonstrate that you are really excited and you're very serious about re-entering that industry and being successful.
Mm-hmm. And while we were talking this week about how to speak about why you're coming back to work, I love that she started with looking at your network and reaching out to people that you haven't been in touch with for some time, and then having a very specific ask, not like, let's get together and talk about my interest in returning to work, but I want to give me your advice about the best websites, the best books, things that will help me get up to date.
Something specific.
Yeah.
Making it easier for people. That really resonated. Both good advice.
Easy both to say yes to and to help you get up to speed. And it's actually valuable for you too. And it's a baby step, as she said, but it's a concrete thing that you can do that's going to lead to exactly those kinds of conversations.
And it's a nice, I was going to say, it's a nice conversation builder with those folks who you haven't had contact with for a while. It's making sure, like Ben was saying, that she was intentional about saying I'm in information gathering mode, which kind of brings it back to, I just want to have a conversation about this. And then asking someone for advice is always a really nice way to be like, what books are you reading? What is important? What is happening in the industry? I think that's always a good way to start that and then build from there.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Carol, for joining us. And thank you, our listeners, for downloading today's episode of Find Your Dream Job. If you like what you hear, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In each issue, we give you the key points of that week's show. We also include links to all the resources mentioned, and you get a transcript of the full episode. If you subscribe to the newsletter now, we'll send you our new guide, the Top Career Podcasts of 2017. Discover all the podcasts that can help you find a great job and get the career you want. Get your free newsletter and podcast guide today. Go to maxlist.org/topcareerpodcast2017. And join us next Wednesday when our special guest will be Dana Redman, host of the Career Q podcast. She'll explain how to switch careers. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.